They say dogs can sense evil, but when Chase, a decorated K9 German Shepherd who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, began growling every time the new nanny walked into the room, no one in the Sanders household thought much of it. After all, she was a sweet old woman, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled neatly into a bun. Mrs. Delaney had come highly recommended by the agency. 30 years of experience, gentle with infants, old school values. Just what Ethan and Sarah needed for their 3-year-old son, Ben, and 9-month-old daughter, Ellie. And yet, Chase hated her from the moment she crossed the threshold. The first time she met the kids, Mrs. Delaney bent down to greet little Ben. Chase immediately lunged between them, not to bite, just to block. He let out a low, steady growl that vibrated through the hardwood floor. His hackles rose, his ears pinned back. Ben stopped in his tracks. Everyone froze. "Oh, my," Mrs. Delaney said with a chuckle, adjusting her cardigan. "Looks like someone's a little jealous." Ethan, still in uniform from his early morning shift with the National Guard, gave the leash a quick tug. Chase, at ease. But Chase didn't move. "I'm sorry about that," Ethan said, tugging again. "He's just protective." "More than protective," Sarah muttered, scooping up Ellie from her high chair. "I've never seen him act like this." They managed to calm Chase down, eventually coaxing him into the mudroom. But he scratched at the door for 10 straight minutes. Scratched so hard, he left claw marks in the paint. That was Monday. By Thursday, Ethan started to wonder if his war dog was losing his mind. Chase had always been hyper-aware, trained to sniff out explosives and danger. But this was different. He wouldn't let Mrs. Delaney anywhere near the children without positioning himself in front of them like a living shield. If she tried to pick up Ellie, he'd growl. If she tucked Ben into bed, he'd whine and pace. One afternoon, when Mrs. Delaney reached to zip up Ben's jacket, Chase grabbed her sleeve in his mouth, not biting, just pulling her away, eyes locked on hers. "Chase!" Ethan barked. "Out of line!" But Mrs. Delaney stayed oddly calm. "No harm done," she said, brushing off her sweater. "Some dogs just don't like older women. Maybe I remind him of someone." Still, it gnawed at Ethan. This was not normal. Chase wasn't some reactive house pet. He was trained to remain calm in gunfire, to protect civilians, to track missing children. But now, his focus was razor-sharp on a 65-year-old nanny folding laundry and baking banana bread. Ethan didn't want to upset Sarah, who had just returned to work as a nurse. But he also couldn't ignore the unease settling in his gut. So he did what every soldier trained in recon and security would do. He installed a hidden camera in the nursery. It wasn't about catching anything, really, just peace of mind. Mrs. Delaney was practically textbook perfect, sang lullabies, cleaned the playroom, even brought homemade cookies for Ben's preschool teacher. Chase, meanwhile, had become a menace. He refused to stay outside when she was inside. He barked at night. He slept by the kids' door, as if guarding them from a threat only he could sense. By Sunday morning, Ethan had convinced himself he was overreacting, until he watched the first set of footage. Nothing obvious happened. But there was something off. In the nursery, Mrs. Delaney picked up Ellie a little too roughly. When the baby cried, the nanny's expression tightened for a split second. Cold, hard. Then, almost instantly, she smiled again. It was quick, subtle, easy to miss. But Chase had been staring at the screen too, eyes fixed. When the moment played out, his ears went flat, and he growled lowly. "Okay, buddy," Ethan whispered. "Let's find out what's really going on." If stories like this matter to you, real stories where dogs protect the innocent, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. You'll be supporting the ones who can't speak for themselves. The next day, Ethan put a second camera in the hallway. He told Sarah only that he wanted to monitor the kids better, maybe catch some cute moments to share with her on long shifts. She didn't ask more. Like him, she trusted Mrs. Delaney. Or wanted to, but Chase did not. On Tuesday, while Ethan worked from home, Mrs. Delaney arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, like always. Chase immediately began pacing. Ethan closed the door to his office, but watched the live feed on his tablet. He sipped his coffee. Waited. 9:15 a.m. Ben asked for water. The nanny got up. 9:18 a.m. Sim. Chase growled from the hallway. 9:19 a.m. Ellie's cry crackled over the baby monitor. Ethan's heart dropped. He tapped into the nursery cam and watched, in real time, as Mrs. Delaney hovered over the crib, hissing something under her breath. She jerked the blanket off. The baby flinched. He hit record. At 9:20, Chase barked loud and sharp, startling everyone. He rushed the nursery door and scratched with a force Ethan hadn't seen since their patrol days. Mrs. Delaney opened it, startled. "What on earth?" "Ah!" Chase growled, baring teeth. "Hey!" Ethan stepped in. "I've got him. He's just anxious." "Maybe it's time you considered a kennel," she said, brushing past him. Ethan didn't reply. He had all the confirmation he needed. That night, after the kids were asleep, Ethan and Sarah watched the footage together. It wasn't just the tone of voice. It wasn't just the way Mrs. Delaney handled the baby. It was the pattern. The way she changed expression only when she thought no one was looking. The quick grabs. The passive-aggressive muttering under her breath. She never hit. But she hurt. With words. With hands too tight. With eyes that saw children as burdens, not blessings. Sarah sobbed. Ethan didn't. He was already dialing the agency. Mrs. Delaney didn't return the next day, nor ever again. But Chase? That night, he finally slept. The silence in the Sanders household the next morning was deafening. Mrs. Delaney didn't come. And despite the early hour, Chase sat calmly by the window, watching the driveway like a sentry on night duty. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just stared. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping his coffee. The house smelled of cinnamon toast and baby shampoo. Ben hummed under his breath, stacking his toy trucks on the rug, while Sarah burped Ellie at the table, her eyes red from the night before. "She's not coming back, right?" Sarah asked. "No," Ethan said flatly. "Agency's already looking for a replacement. I filed a complaint and gave them the footage." Sarah nodded, pulling Ellie closer. "Do we call the police?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. What she did was wrong, no doubt. But there's no bruises, no clear injuries. It's emotional abuse at best. And that's hard to prosecute unless it's extreme or repetitive." "Isn't it still worth reporting?" "Yeah," he said, "and I will. I just want to make sure we have enough. I think we need to look deeper." Sarah glanced at him. "You think there's more?" "I don't think," Ethan said, eyes on Chase. "I know Chase does." Chase had never been a pet. He was part of Ethan's unit overseas. He'd tracked bombs, saved soldiers from IEDs, even sniffed out a missing girl in Kandahar who'd been hidden in a grain silo for 3 days. He was a dog trained to read what humans couldn't see. Scent, stress, emotion, danger. So if Chase had been growling from day one, Ethan figured there had to be more. He spent the next few hours reviewing older footage. The security system had been installed a month ago, shortly before they hired Mrs. Delaney. Though only the most recent days had been combed through, Ethan hadn't yet looked at the early weeks. And that's when he noticed something strange. In footage from 2 weeks earlier, when Chase was kept outside during nanny hours, Ben's behavior had changed. He wasn't the bright, chatty little boy Ethan knew. He didn't sing his favorite truck songs. He barely touched his lunch. There were several moments where Ben flinched when Mrs. Delaney reached for his shoulder or tried to tie his shoes. One clip in particular made Ethan grip the arm of the couch so tightly his knuckles turned white. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring. Mrs. Delaney walked by with a basket of laundry and stopped. "Crayons on the floor again?" she said, her voice tight. "You messy little thing." Then she reached down, so fast it was almost a blur, and pinched his arm. Not hard, but deliberately. Ben gasped, not loud enough to cry, just enough to freeze. She kept walking. Ethan hit pause. That moment might have looked like nothing to someone else. But to a soldier trained to assess body language, to read intent under pressure, it screamed control, coercion, small abuses buried under smiles. And it explained everything. Chase had seen it first. He'd been trying to tell them. Ethan called the agency again, this time more firmly. He emailed all the footage, sent a detailed written statement, asked whether any other families had filed similar complaints. The rep hesitated. "I can't speak about other clients." "Don't lie to me," Ethan said calmly. "I served 12 years. I know when someone's dodging." Another pause. Then, there was one incident. A family in Vermont. They dismissed her after the mother became uncomfortable, but no formal charges were filed. Ethan hung up. That night, after putting the kids to bed, he sat on the back porch with Chase, a bottle of beer at his side and the baby monitor in his lap. "Good boy," he murmured, rubbing Chase's ears. "I should have listened sooner." Chase leaned into him, the way he always did when Ethan was processing something heavy. The dog had never needed words to communicate. He just knew. The next morning, Ethan had to go back on shift. Sarah was off and stayed home with the kids, and Chase refused to leave the nursery, even when the sun came up. Around noon, Sarah heard a knock at the front door. She checked the camera before opening it. Mrs. Delaney. Her hair was disheveled, her lipstick smudged. She clutched a leather purse tightly in both hands. I left my reading glasses," she said. "They're prescription. I think they're in the living room." Sarah didn't move. "Actually, I don't think we have anything of yours," she replied. "You should contact the agency." "Oh, I did," Delaney said quickly. "But they won't answer. I just need 5 minutes." "Sorry," Sarah said, voice firm now. "We're not comfortable with that." Chase appeared behind her, tail rigid, growling. Not loud, controlled, but unmistakable. Mrs. Delaney's smile dropped. Her eyes flicked to the dog. For a moment, Sarah swore she saw a flash of something, cold and sharp, cross her face. Then the smile returned, thin, forced. "Of course," she said. "Have a blessed day." She turned and walked back to her car, the purse clutched like a weapon. Sarah locked the door. Her hands trembled. That night, when Ethan returned, Sarah told him everything. "She wasn't here for glasses," he said. "No," Sarah agreed. "She was here to see if we were going to press charges. Which means she knows she crossed a line." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan stood, walked into his office, and pulled out an old folder, his military report book. He wrote out everything. Dates, times, descriptions, clips. He filed a report with the local police. Maybe there wouldn't be enough to prosecute. Maybe she'd slip through. But he wasn't going to stay silent. Not again. 2 days later, they received a call from another family, a mother of twins. She'd found Ethan's name through a parenting group online, saw his warning post. "She worked for us, too," the woman said, "and we thought we were crazy. My daughter started stuttering again. My son would wet the bed. We couldn't prove it, but now I know." By the end of the week, 3 other parents had reached out. Different towns, same pattern. Small acts of cruelty, masked in charm. Tiny scars, invisible to the naked eye, but real, deep. Ethan collected their testimonies, and he wasn't done. That Sunday, he stood on stage at the local town hall during a community safety meeting. He brought Chase up with him. "This dog didn't just save lives overseas," he said, resting a hand on Chase's back. "He saved my kids when I didn't see the danger standing in my own home." He didn't share the worst details, not with kids in the audience, but he shared enough. And he urged every parent to listen to their instincts, to pay attention when something feels off, and most of all, listen to your dog, especially one who's been trained to recognize danger better than most humans ever could. Chase stood tall by his side, silent but proud. The applause didn't shake him. Nothing ever did, except injustice. By the following week, Chase had officially become more than just the family dog. To neighbors, he was a fixture on the porch, calm, alert, always watching. To Sarah and Ethan, he was a protector in every sense of the word. And to Ben, he was a superhero. "Chase saved me from the mean lady," the little boy said matter-of-factly to his preschool teacher during circle time. He even drew a crayon portrait of Chase standing between him and a stick-figure woman with scary eyes. Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry when the teacher showed him, but Chase wasn't done. Every night, after the kids went to bed, Ethan dug deeper. What began as concern had now turned into quiet obsession. He couldn't let it go. Not after what Mrs. Delaney almost got away with. With help from other families who had come forward, he created a secure online folder. Testimonies, videos, interviews. One parent even dug up an old social media profile of Delaney under a different last name. Ethan ran a background search. It turned out she'd been dismissed from 3 agencies over the last decade. Each time, quietly. No criminal charges, no formal record, just families that stopped calling and agencies that parted ways. She had simply moved on, like nothing happened. Sarah had mixed feelings about digging up more. "You think we'll actually get her arrested?" she asked one night as they loaded the dishwasher. "No," Ethan said, "but that's not the point." "Then what is?" "To make sure she can't move on again. Not without people knowing who she really is." Sarah was quiet for the moment. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said, "we do this right." The first call came from a local news station. Someone had seen the post Ethan made in the Community Safety Forum. The station wanted to do a feature, focus on Chase's behavior, Ethan's background in the military, the rising trend of hidden nanny abuse, and how dogs can sometimes see what humans don't. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't one for attention, but Sarah was clear. "If we don't talk, someone else will, and it'll be watered down." So Ethan agreed, on one condition: they wouldn't use the kids' names or faces. The story would be about Chase. The interview took place on a sunny Thursday in the backyard. Chase wore his old canine vest, patches faded but still proud. He sat next to Ethan like a soldier in uniform, calm, grounded, watching. The reporter was respectful. She asked Ethan what he noticed, what he felt when Chase growled, what instincts kicked in. "I wanted to believe my dog was just being overprotective," Ethan said. "Turns out, he was being the only one who saw what was really happening." "And what would you say to other parents watching this?" the reporter asked. Ethan looked into the camera. "Listen to your dog," he said, "and trust your gut, even if someone looks trustworthy. It doesn't matter how nice they act. Pay attention to the little things, because little things turn into big things fast." The clip aired the next evening on the local CBS station. The segment was titled, "Canine Hero Saves Children from Silent Danger Inside Their Own Home." The story blew up. Comments poured in. So many viewers said the same thing. "My dog always hated my ex. I should have listened." Or, "This reminded me of a babysitter we once had. I didn't know why our Labrador acted up, but now I'm wondering." People shared their own stories, not just about dogs, but about missed warning signs, about how easily someone with a good reference and a warm smile could walk into your home and leave behind damage invisible to everyone else. Ethan and Sarah read them together at night. One message stood out from the rest. It came from a woman in upstate New York. Her daughter had developed severe anxiety at age 5. They blamed it on school, on a move, even on food dyes. But reading Ethan's story clicked something. She had once hired a nanny through the same agency. The woman's name? Janet Delaney. That's when Ethan decided to go national. He contacted a former buddy from the military who now worked in cybersecurity. With a few legal tools and online resources, they traced Janet Delaney's movements over the last 12 years. She had used 3 aliases, applied to jobs in 5 different states, changed agencies when things got tense. But each and every time, she had been around young children. And Chase? Chase knew from day one. Ethan filed a formal report to Child Protective Services with all the data gathered. Then he shared everything with a larger online watchdog group that tracks flagged caregivers across the country. This wasn't just about justice now, it was about protection. "You think this'll stop her?" Sarah asked one night as they sat on the front steps, watching the fireflies spark across the lawn. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, "but I'm betting she won't be hired again without someone doing a search first." He leaned down and rubbed Chase's shoulder. "This dog did more than bark," he said. "He changed the outcome." A week later, Chase was honored at a city event, Canine Appreciation Day at the local fairgrounds. Kids came to meet him, take pictures, pet his ears. A city official handed Ethan a plaque that read, "For extraordinary service, protection, and loyalty beyond words." But Chase didn't care about plaques. He only watched Ben and Ellie. Whenever they wandered more than 10 feet away, he moved closer. No growls now, just gentle nudges. A quiet, steady gaze. The kind you only see from someone who's already faced danger and lived to guard others from it. Back home that night, Sarah tucked Ben into bed. "Mommy," he asked, "can Chase sleep in my room again?" She smiled. "You want him nearby?" Ben nodded. "Yeah, I feel safer." Sarah kissed his forehead. "Then yes, sweetheart, of course he can." Outside the door, Chase was already waiting. As Sarah closed the nursery door behind her, Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist and whispered, "We're good." "We're safe," she agreed. And for the first time in weeks, it finally felt true. They never expected one dog's growl to echo so far. Within days of the news segment airing, Ethan and Sarah's inbox was flooded. Not just with comments and shares, but with media requests, concerned parents, and even advocacy groups. A producer from Good Morning America reached out. So did a major pet food brand, asking to feature Chase in an upcoming campaign about everyday heroes. It felt surreal. Just 2 weeks ago, Chase was simply their dog. Loyal, disciplined, part of the family. Now, he was being called a national hero. And, truth be told, he didn't seem to notice. He still woke up at dawn. He still circled the crib twice before lying down. He still stared out the window at the same spot in the driveway, just in case someone he didn't trust ever came back. Chase wasn't interested in interviews. He was still on duty. On a cool Tuesday morning, Ethan got a call from a number he didn't recognize. He answered, expecting another reporter. But it wasn't media. It was a woman named Janice Mercer. Her voice was shaky. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know you've probably heard from a lot of people. But I saw the story about your dog, about Mrs. Delaney." Ethan sat up. "Yes?" "She used to work for me," Janice whispered. "I didn't know her last name was fake. She said it was Johnson when she applied, but I recognized her voice. The way she talks, I'm sure of it." Ethan waited. "She watched my grandson for 6 months," Janice continued. "My daughter was getting back on her feet. We thought we were lucky to find someone with experience, but weird things kept happening." She described it all. The child suddenly afraid of nap time. Toys disappearing. Food left untouched. The dog they had, a rescue mutt named Bingo, began peeing in the house for the first time in years. He growled constantly. They thought he was getting old. "We gave her a glowing reference," Janice said, her voice cracking. "We didn't see it, but the dog did, just like yours." Ethan closed his eyes and exhaled. It wasn't just them, not even close. By the end of that week, 8 more families had contacted him with similar stories. Some had old video clips, others had journals, witness statements, or just gut-wrenching regret. The pattern was clear. Mrs. Delaney, or Janet Johnson, or Carol Dean, depending on the year, had a method. She played the kind grandmother, the helpful old soul. She baked, she sang, she quoted scripture, and called children blessings. But she punished in private. She used silence and fear like weapons. And the only ones who ever saw the truth were the dogs. Ethan decided it was time to go further than social media and local TV. He reached out to a retired federal investigator who now ran a nonprofit that tracked flagged caregivers and compiled nationwide abuse registries. The man, a gruff, no-nonsense type named Reggie Collins, had worked for Homeland Security and now dedicated his days to closing legal loopholes for unreported abuse cases. "This kind of stuff slips through the cracks all the time," Reggie said. "Too many private families. Too little evidence. Nobody wants to make noise unless there's bruises, but emotional scars are real." Reggie helped Ethan consolidate the statements into one formal report for the state attorney general's office. It wouldn't guarantee a criminal case, but it would put Mrs. Delaney's name and aliases into a database that future employers could find. Reggie also gave Ethan an idea that hadn't crossed his mind. "You ever think about making Chase a therapy dog?" he asked. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "He's a canine." "Exactly," Reggie said. "You'd be surprised how many kids trust a dog before they trust a person, especially after trauma. Your boy here's already saved lives. Maybe he's meant to keep doing it." The process to register Chase as a certified therapy dog took a few weeks. Even though he was already highly trained, therapy certification required additional temperament tests, being handled by strangers, responding calmly in chaotic environments, and most importantly, sensing distress. Chase passed everything with ease. In fact, the lead evaluator at the county center said something that stuck with Ethan. "This dog doesn't just obey," she said. "He understands. He reads the room better than most humans I know." Ethan chuckled. "Tell me about it." Soon after certification, Ethan and Chase began visiting local schools for short presentations about dog safety, trust, and awareness. Most visits were simple. Chase would show off basic commands, roll over, high-five, and let kids pet him. But every once in a while, Ethan noticed something deeper. He remembered one visit in particular, a third-grade classroom in a charter school downtown. A little girl sat in the back. She didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't move much. While the other kids gathered around Chase, she stayed in her seat, knees drawn to her chest. Chase noticed. Without prompting, he walked slowly toward her. Sat down. Didn't bark, didn't push, just rested his head on the desk in front of her, eyes level with hers. She looked at him, then slowly reached out, touched his head, and started to cry. Her teacher later explained that the girl had been through a domestic abuse situation. She hadn't talked to anyone in 2 months, but something in Chase cracked the shell. He was more than a dog. He was a bridge. Word spread. Soon, Ethan and Chase were visiting foster care centers, youth counseling offices, and even court-appointed visitation rooms. Chase wasn't just a symbol of safety. He brought it with him. Sarah called him our four-legged whisperer. Ben just called him Captain Chase. But Ethan? He called him partner. Meanwhile, the agency that had originally hired Mrs. Delaney quietly removed her from their database and issued an official apology to affected families. It wasn't much, but it was something. The real win came weeks later when Ethan received a short email. "We've added Janet Delaney, also known as Carol Dean and Janet Johnson, to the National Caregiver Misconduct Index. Thank you for your contribution, your testimony, and your vigilance. Your K9's role in this case is noted in our records. Stay safe, and keep going." Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Then he looked over at Chase, lying next to Ben on the rug, watching cartoons together like they had no care in the world. "You did it, buddy," Ethan said softly. "You stopped her for good." That night, as the house settled into its usual hush, Sarah brought up something new. "You know," she said, folding laundry, "we should write a children's book about Chase." Ethan laughed. "A book? Why not? Chase the dog who listened." "You said it yourself. He reads rooms better than most people. Maybe he can help kids learn to speak up, or at least trust their instincts." Ethan paused, thought about the little girl who hadn't spoken until she met Chase. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, that's not a bad idea." He picked up a toy truck, tucked it into the toy bin, and looked toward the sleeping dog by the nursery door. Not a bad idea at all. 6 months later, the Sanders home was unrecognizable, not in appearance, but in energy. Gone was the tension that had once simmered beneath the surface. The baby cried less, Ben laughed more, and the walls, once echoing with uncertainty, now buzzed with warmth. Peace had returned, and in the middle of it all lay Chase, sprawled in his usual spot on the living room rug, tail thumping lightly every time Ben raced by with a toy truck, or when Ellie babbled her newly formed words. "Chay!" she squealed, climbing onto his back like he was a pony. Chase didn't flinch, didn't even open his eyes. He was home. He was safe. And most importantly, his job was done. Well, almost. The children's book Sarah had joked about writing. It became real. They titled it, Chase, the Dog Who Knew. The story followed a cartoon German shepherd who could sense when something was wrong, who barked, growled, and stood tall to protect the innocent, even when no one understood him. The book never mentioned Mrs. Delaney by name or showed anything graphic, but the core message was clear. Trust your instincts, speak up when things don't feel right, and listen when someone, or some dog, is trying to protect you. It was published independently and made available through community centers, schools, and libraries. Word of mouth took care of the rest. Parents began ordering copies online. Teachers read it during story time. Therapists kept it in waiting rooms. One Amazon review read, "My daughter was hurt by someone we trusted. She never had words for it until she read this book and said, 'Mommy, I think our dog tried to tell us too.'" One Sunday, Ethan and Sarah were invited to speak at a state child advocacy conference in Chicago. They hesitated at first, didn't want to reopen wounds, but eventually agreed. If Chase could sit through artillery blasts, they figured they could handle a panel. They flew with Chase in cabin, specially approved thanks to his new therapy dog credentials. At the conference, Chase became the star attraction. In a ballroom of 400 people, teachers, social workers, therapists, and law enforcement, Chase walked calmly beside Ethan onto the stage. When Ethan told their story, you could hear a pin drop. There were gasps. There were tears. And when Ethan ended with, "He barked because we weren't looking," and thank God he did, the standing ovation lasted nearly a full minute. Later, as people crowded around to take pictures and pet Chase, one attendee, a trauma counselor from Denver, leaned in and said, "This dog didn't just stop a bad person. He gave people permission to believe what they feel." Meanwhile, back home in Ohio, the Sanders neighborhood began organizing something no one had expected: a K-9 community awareness program. With help from the local sheriff's department and a few former handlers like Ethan, the initiative taught families not just how to raise safe kids, but how to understand their pets better. The program had 3 core messages. Behavior is communication. Trust is earned. Dogs are family. Listen to them like you would your own child. Chase became the program's poster pup. His picture, alert, eyes forward, badge-shaped tag on his collar, was printed on flyers and banners across schools, police departments, and even pet shelters. Ethan was amazed by how things unfolded. He'd never planned for any of this. In fact, some nights he lay awake wondering how different things could have been if Chase hadn't reacted the way he did, if Chase had stayed silent, if no one had watched the tapes, if Mrs. Delaney had moved on to another unsuspecting home. But instead they had stood still, listened, paid attention. That single decision reshaped everything. One crisp autumn evening, Ethan stood outside grilling burgers as the kids played in the leaves. Chase sat by the porch steps, head high, ears flicking at each noise. Sarah walked out with a beer in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "A letter," she said, "from a woman named Cheryl Martin. Lives in Vermont. Says she saw our story." Ethan opened the letter. Inside was a photograph of a smiling young girl with a shaggy golden retriever and a short handwritten note. "I'm alive today because my dog growled at the same woman. My parents didn't understand. They left the sitter with me while they went out. But they came home early and found me crying in my room. He had growled so much he tore up the carpet trying to get in. They listened, and they believed me. Years later, I saw your video. Same face, same name. Thank you for speaking out. Thank Chase for me." Ethan folded the letter quietly. "She was ours," he said, "before us." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "How many more are out there, you think?" "I don't know," he said, "but I hope they all have a Chase." One morning, a few weeks later, Ethan took Chase to the vet for a checkup. It was routine. Chase was approaching 9 years old. Still strong, still alert, but slowing down a bit. "Joints look good," the vet said. "Weight's perfect. Teeth are strong. Only thing I'd say is, he's tired." Ethan laughed. "Aren't we all?" "No, I mean it," the vet said kindly. "He's had a career, a full one. It's okay to start letting him relax more. Give him more porch days, less calls to action." Ethan looked down at Chase, sitting patiently, waiting for the next move. "Yeah," he said, "he's earned that." And so Chase began a softer chapter. He still visited schools occasionally, still walked Ben to the corner bus stop, still stayed close when Ellie had nightmares. But the long drives, the busy events, the bright lights and noise, that was winding down. Now, he spent more time lying in sun patches on the porch, or curled beside the fireplace on cold nights, tail thumping as the kids read books aloud beside him. "Once upon a time," Ben would say, "there was a dog who knew everything." Chase would lift his head slightly, and then sigh, eyes closing again. A few days before Christmas, Sarah organized a small neighborhood gathering. Nothing fancy, just cocoa, cookies, and carols. But the kids all showed up wearing little sheriff badges with Chase's face printed on them. One by one, they took turns petting him and whispering their own secrets into his ear. "Sometimes I get scared at night. My dad yells a lot. I think I saw someone steal a package." Chase listened to each one. Patient, silent, present. No barking, no growling, just knowing. That night, after everyone left and the kids had gone to bed, Ethan sat beside Chase on the porch with a blanket and a cup of cider. "You've done your work, old friend," he said. "You didn't just protect this family. You gave others a voice. You helped kids feel seen." Chase laid his head on Ethan's boot. The stars overhead shimmered quietly. "You changed lives," Ethan whispered, without ever saying a word. And in the stillness of that winter night, with the snow just beginning to fall, and the wind brushing the edge of the world, the only sound was the soft breath of a dog who knew. His mission was complete. The first snow of the new year fell quietly on the town, blanketing everything in a soft, clean white. Inside the Sanders home, warmth crackled from the fireplace, cocoa steamed on the kitchen counter, and Ellie toddled around in mismatched socks, trying to sing Jingle Bells to Chase. "Jingle bye, jingle bye." She plopped down beside him with a dramatic sigh. "Chase, you're not singing." Chase wagged his tail once. His eyes were slower now, but his spirit hadn't faded a bit. He was no longer the hyper-vigilant soldier of a year ago. He was something deeper. Family. A new calendar hung on the wall in the hallway. 12 pages of Chase. The local rescue center had featured him in their annual fundraiser, and they sold out of copies within a week. Ethan had received emails from people as far as Utah and Kansas asking for reprints. "We never had a dog growing up," one man wrote, "but your story made me realize I want my kids to have one. A real one. One who'll love them enough to growl when something's wrong." Chase had become something more than a protector. He had become a teacher. Back at the elementary school, where Ben had just started first grade, the principal invited Ethan to help lead a new program. Speak Safe, Feel Safe. It was designed to help children recognize uncomfortable situations, trust their instincts, and communicate better with both adults and animals. And at the heart of it, a German Shepherd named Chase. The school even built a quiet corner in the library called Chase's Corner. Kids could sit, read to Chase, or just spend time near him if they were having a hard day. One boy, a foster child new to the district, came in almost every morning before class. He didn't say much, but he always went straight to Chase, curled up beside him, and just sat. After a few weeks, he looked up at Ethan and said, "He's the only one who doesn't make me talk first." That was all Ethan needed to hear. Meanwhile, Sarah found a new purpose, too. The book she and Ethan wrote, Chase, the Dog Who Knew, had quietly become a parenting resource beyond their imagination. She started hosting small workshops at churches and mom groups, reading the book aloud and discussing the quiet ways dogs warn us, the subtle signs kids give, and how to build a home where both feel safe. It wasn't about fear, it was about awareness. "Kids and animals speak the same language," she would say. "They don't always use words, but they'll always tell you when something's wrong, if you're willing to pay attention." As for Ethan, he never returned to active duty after the story went public. His service was behind him now, but his mission had simply evolved. He began working part-time with a national veteran K9 organization, helping former military dogs transition into therapy roles. He taught new handlers how to trust their animal's instinct, even when it conflicted with what they thought they knew. "Chase taught me that sometimes the job isn't to fight," he told a room full of handlers once. "Sometimes it's to see, and sometimes it's to stand in a doorway and say, 'Not today.'" One chilly morning in March, Ben ran inside waving a flyer. "Dad, we're doing a hero day at school, and guess who I picked?" Ethan smiled. "Chase? No, you, of course." But Chase, too. On Hero Day, Ben stood on stage with Ethan and Chase, nervously holding a cue card. His teacher offered to read it for him, but Ben shook his head. "My hero," Ben said, his voice strong, "is my dad, because he fought for our country, and my dog, because he fought for me." The applause was polite. Then everyone turned to Chase, who stood tall beside Ben. That's when the clapping got louder. One teacher wiped her eyes. Ethan's throat tightened, not because of pride, but because they had come full circle. As Chase grew older, his steps slower, Ethan knew the time would eventually come when their four-legged hero would rest permanently. But he didn't focus on that. Instead, he focused on the now. Long walks at sunset, treats after story time, quiet evenings by the fire, where Ben and Ellie leaned against Chase like he was made of wool and love and patience. One summer evening, Ethan stood outside watching fireflies flicker through the yard. Chase sat beside him, as he always had, since the first time Ethan brought him home from deployment. "You've changed a lot of lives, buddy," Ethan whispered, "more than I ever did overseas." Chase blinked slowly, his gray-flecked muzzle turned toward the stars. "You taught me to be a better father," Ethan continued, "to look closer, to trust instinct, to listen." The porch light buzzed softly behind them. A child laughed inside. Chase didn't need to bark. His silence said everything. The legacy of Chase went on, not through fame, not through money, but through action. Every child who felt seen after sitting with a dog. Every parent who paid closer attention because of a bark they might have ignored. Every family that decided to speak out because of a story they heard online about a German Shepherd who refused to back down. Chase didn't save the world, but he saved their world, and that was enough. 1 year to the day after the Delaney incident, the Sanders family hosted a small backyard barbecue. Nothing fancy, just friends, neighbors, kids running barefoot in the grass. At one point, Sarah clinked a glass and said, "I just want to say something." People quieted. She pointed to Chase, resting under the picnic table, half asleep. "He saved us, not just from something terrible, but from living unaware, from becoming people who ignore the signs, or brush off our kids' feelings, or forget that love sometimes looks like a growl." Everyone smiled. Some wiped their eyes. Ben ran over and hugged Chase's neck. "Best dog in the world," he whispered. And he was. Thank you for following this journey. If you made it all the way here, thank you for giving your time and heart to Chase's story. He may be fictional, but the emotions, the truths, and the lessons are all too real. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a dog warn you about someone? Or seen a pet act differently when something just wasn't right? Share your story below. Let's celebrate the quiet heroes on 4 legs who always watch, always protect, and never ask for anything in return. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Heroes for Animals to keep these stories going and to honor the ones who never stop loving us. See you in the next story.